The morning began gray, with heavy clouds covering the city. Chris rode his bike through the narrow streets, carrying a delivery backpack. The air was chilly, mingled with the distant scent of roasting coffee and car exhaust. He passed shops and bakeries, waving to acquaintances, unaware of what the day had in store. Everything seemed normal until a distant scream cut through the silence of the busy street. Chris heard the sharp sound and turned, seeing a column of smoke rising rapidly above an upscale coffee shop. The glass facade trembled with heat, and flames licked at the woodwork inside. People screamed, running in panic, trying to escape the thick smoke. Instinctively, Chris dropped his bike in the middle of the sidewalk without thinking of the consequences. Something inside him told him he had to act. He ran to the coffee shop door, feeling the heat emanating from the building. The smell of burnt coffee mingled with smoke and melted plastic. Inside, customers were trapped between tables, frightened, some coughing, others paralyzed with fear. The shrill alarm echoed between the glass walls. Chris didn't hesitate. He walked in without looking back. Flames licked at the wooden furniture, sending sparks flying. Chris saw a young woman trapped near a fallen table, arms outstretched for help. He moved forward, dodging fallen chairs and hot utensils, feeling the intense heat and choking smoke. Each step felt challenging, but the urgency of the lives before him gave him courage. He reached out, holding the young woman tightly, and pulled her toward the exit. As he reached the door, Chris noticed other customers trying to escape through a side exit. He helped an elderly woman through, covering her with his coat to protect her from the smoke. The sound of approaching sirens brought hope, but the situation was still far from under control. He returned inside without hesitation, determined to ensure no one was left behind. Amidst the flames, the heat was almost unbearable, and the smoke made breathing difficult. Chris guided each person, encouraging them to continue, holding trembling hands and guiding frightened eyes. Some customers fell to the ground, disoriented, and he had to carry them to the exit. Each life saved swelled his heart, a mixture of fear and determination that drove him on. He found a young woman trapped under a fallen table, her long hair disheveled, her eyes wide with panic. Unsure who she was, Chris lifted her up, feeling the heat burning his arms. "You'll be okay, I promise," he said, trying to reassure her. The young woman clung to him, and together they ran for the exit, dodging sudden flames that erupted from the cracked floor. Outside the café, the world had seemed to stop. People huddled on the sidewalk, coughing and frightened, as firefighters began to control the blaze. Chris released the young woman and covered her with his coat again, assuring her she was safe. She looked into his eyes, surprised and grateful, but speechless. Chris just took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened, unaware that the young woman was Emily Carter, daughter of the billionaire owner of the hotel where his mother worked. He returned to the street, looking at the cafe, and realized he had done more than he could have imagined. Smoke rose in thick columns, and the smell of burning permeated the neighborhood. People murmured about the delivery man's heroism, but Chris wasn't seeking recognition. He only knew that he had done his duty, saving lives through impulse and courage. Virginia was at the hotel, cleaning hallways and rooms when she heard about the fire. Someone mentioned that the billionaire's daughter had been rescued by an ordinary man, unknown to her. Virginia's heart raced. She ran to the cafeteria, and upon seeing Chris among the survivors, she realized her son had been the hero. A mixture of pride and worry filled her chest. She watched Chris from a distance, seeing the smoke still rising and people being treated by the firefighters. Her mind raced. This young woman was the daughter of David Carter, the hotel billionaire. Virginia had always sensed the girl's arrogance and coldness, and now she knew that Chris, her son, had risked himself for someone who perhaps didn't even deserve it. The impact of the situation made it hard for Virginia to think straight. Every detail of the scene seemed surreal. Chris, sweaty, his arms slightly burned by the heat, helping people away from danger. She felt proud, but a pang of fear struck her. What if this connection between Chris and the billionaire's daughter had dire consequences? All around, firefighters worked hurriedly, pulling hoses and breaking down doors to put out blazes. The smell of smoke and burning wood mingled with the aroma of burnt coffee and melted sugar. Chris felt the weight of the heat and tension, but also the adrenaline that only a life-or-death situation could generate. Chris approached a group of still panicked customers, guiding them away from the cafe. Some were slightly burned or bruised, but alive. He ran a hand through his sweaty hair, breathing deeply but remaining calm. Each person he helped deepened his sense of accomplishment. Emily looked at him, still speechless, and Chris noticed a strange glint in her eyes. Gratitude? Fear? Maybe both. He just nodded slightly and said, "It's okay now. You'll be safe." The confidence in his voice seemed to calm everyone around. The smoke began to clear as firefighters brought the blaze under control. Chris stepped away from the crowd, panting, his hands still shaking from the effort. Emily finally said something. "Thank you. You saved my life." Her voice was shaky but firm. Chris just smiled slightly, feeling the importance of that moment without needing recognition or praise. Chris finally stepped away from the building, watching the firefighters tame the remaining flames. The smell of smoke lingered, but the sense of accomplishment was stronger. He didn't know who Emily was, but his instincts had guided him and saved lives. Virginia finally approached, tears streaming down her face. She hugged Chris tightly, murmuring words of pride and concern at the same time. "You're my pride, but my God, what a scare," she said, feeling every beat of her son's heart. Smoke still curled over the coffee shop, while sirens echoed down the street. Chris felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion as Virginia tried to process that her son had saved the daughter of the most powerful man in town. The sun was beginning to peek through the clouds, illuminating the scene of chaos and heroism. Virginia held Chris by the arm, still trembling as he tried to breathe and compose himself. They knew that day would change everything, but no one could predict how.
The sun was beginning to set over the city, tinting the buildings with orange and gold hues. Chris walked through the park, still reflecting on the fire. He didn't know who the young woman he had saved was, but the weight of the heroic act remained heavy on his mind. Each step reminded him of the heat of the fire, the screams and the fear in people's eyes. He felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and quiet pride. Meanwhile, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the delivery man who had pulled her from the fire. The image of Chris running through the flames stuck in her mind, along with feelings of gratitude and confusion. For the first time, someone had shown her courage and care without expecting anything in return. An unexpected feeling began to emerge, a mix of gratitude and a curiosity she couldn't name. The next day, Emily decided to look for him. She found Chris on the street, helping an elderly man cross the sidewalk. He smiled shyly when he realized she recognized him. "Thank you, really," Emily said, her voice trembling but firm. Chris responded humbly, saying he had only done what anyone would have done, without expecting anything in return. They began meeting discreetly, first to thank her, then to talk. Chris showed himself to be kind, patient, and honest, while Emily, accustomed to arrogance and privilege, felt increasingly drawn to his simplicity. Small gestures of kindness and thoughtfulness shifted something within her, awakening feelings she had never experienced before. Each encounter revealed a new layer of Chris. He spoke of his simple life, his love for his mother, and his job as a delivery driver. Emily listened, fascinated, perceiving the difference between wealth and character. She began to admire his courage, intelligence, and above all, his integrity. She felt ashamed of the contempt she often showed others, including Virginia. One day, Emily commented on her father's luxury hotel, mentioning the cleaning lady she'd always despised. Chris frowned, realizing who it was. Emily, innocent, was unaware of the connection between them. She told little stories of arrogance and contempt, unaware that Chris was connected to the woman she'd always criticized. When Emily discovered that Virginia was Chris's mother, her emotional world shook. The anger she felt toward the woman at the hotel mixed with the gratitude and love she was beginning to feel for Chris. It was a confusing mix of feelings: guilt, surprise, and admiration. She realized that this relationship would change not only her destiny, but also that of Chris's mother. Emily began to reflect on her own arrogance. She remembered how she treated the hotel staff and realized her actions were cruel. For Chris, she wanted to change. His every gesture, every kind word was a mirror showing her the person she could be. The love growing in her heart began to soften her character. Chris, on the other hand, remained humble and discreet. He didn't seek status or rewards for what he had done. His heart was focused on truth and caring for Emily, unmoved by social pressure or wealth. Each encounter strengthened their connection, but he remained grounded, aware of the differences between their worlds. Virginia watched from afar, feeling both pride and fear. She knew Emily still harbored traces of arrogance and malice, but she couldn't ignore the change she saw in the billionaire's daughter. Every encounter between Chris and Emily left her torn between anxiety and hope. She knew love could transform Emily, but she also feared that old wounds would resurface. In a quiet cafe, Chris and Emily talked about the fire. Emily described how she felt during the moments of panic, and Chris described the adrenaline and fear. They both laughed nervously, sharing details no one else knew. Their intimacy grew, and Emily felt she could trust him completely, a rare thing in her life. Emily began to apologize for her past behavior toward Virginia, though she was still nervous. Chris listened attentively, without judgment, only showing understanding. She felt a relief in realizing she could change and that Chris wouldn't reject her for her flaws. With each encounter, Emily grew closer to a better version of herself. One afternoon, they walked through the park as the sun gilded the trees. Emily held Chris's hand without realizing it, a simple gesture that carried all the affection she felt. He smiled and squeezed lightly, responding tenderly. They both felt that this connection was unlike anything they'd ever experienced, and that something profound was blossoming between them. Virginia, alone at home, thought about each encounter with her son. She knew Emily was still complicated and proud, but she saw clear signs of transformation. The cleaning lady wept silently, moved by her son's courage and the strength of the love he inspired. She felt hope, but also fear that the relationship would bring unexpected problems. One day, Emily casually mentioned her father, David, unaware that her words could create tension. Chris remained silent, realizing that the billionaire's presence still cast a shadow over their relationship. Emily, confused, asked if he was okay, and Chris simply smiled, trying to reassure her. The atmosphere of romance and tension mingled, making them both wary. The relationship between Chris and Emily began to attract discreet attention at the hotel. Some staff members noticed their closeness, others noticed subtle changes in Emily's behavior. Virginia watched from afar, emotional and apprehensive, fearing that the outside world might interfere with something so delicate. Emily began to appreciate simple gestures, like a smile, a shared coffee, or a sincere hug. Chris showed her that affection and attention didn't require wealth. Emily learned to see beauty in simplicity and began to distance herself from the arrogance that had defined her until now. The bond between them grew stronger every day, and Emily felt that Chris was unlike anyone she had ever met. He challenged her to be better, to reflect on her actions and the life she led. Passion blossomed alongside gratitude, blending confusing and intense feelings Emily had never felt before. Virginia, concerned about the difference in their worlds, finally decided to talk to Chris. She warned him about the potential impact of getting involved with Emily, reminding her of the young woman's difficulties and complex nature. Chris listened but responded firmly. He trusted his feelings and believed in the change he saw in Emily. Emily, for her part, felt a whirlwind of emotions. She didn't want to disappoint Chris, but she also feared her father David's reaction. Each encounter was a test of courage and sincerity, and she began to realize that true love required courage to face challenges. The trust between Chris and Emily grew, as did Emily's transformation. She began to treat Virginia with more respect, although she still felt ashamed of her past. Her love for Chris made it impossible to hold on to old hurts, and the young woman began to become a more generous and attentive person. As they walked into the sunset, Emily held Chris's hand again, feeling safe and tender. Chris, with a calm smile, squeezed her hand back, promising protection and honesty. They both knew the path ahead would be challenging, but love and courage would guide them.
The morning sun illuminated the luxury hotel, reflecting off the mirrored windows and creating an almost unreal aura. Chris walked the hallways, still reeling from the emotional toll of his recent encounters with Emily. He knew that getting close to the billionaire's daughter might attract unwanted attention, but he couldn't pull away. His heart was caught between love and caution, unsure of what the future held. Meanwhile, Emily was preparing for a discreet date with Chris. She wore something simple but elegant, and butterflies fluttered in her stomach. Anxiety mixed with the hope of being close to him again. Her every gesture reflected the transformation love brought about, softening her previous pride and arrogance. David, watching from his hotel office, began to notice the closeness between his daughter and Chris. His expression was serious, his cold eyes analyzing every detail. He couldn't allow someone of humble origins to get close to Emily, fearing it would ruin the perfect image he'd always cultivated. The billionaire began to plan subtle ways to interfere. Chris and Emily met in the hotel garden, among flowers and wooden benches. They talked about life, laughter mingling with the birdsong. Emily held Chris's hand, demonstrating trust and gratitude. He responded tenderly, yet always cautiously, aware of the impact each gesture had. The connection between them grew silently, yet intensely. Virginia watched from afar, her heart heavy and her eyes brimming with tears. She knew Emily was changing because of Chris, but she still feared the billionaire's reaction. Her son's love and courage inspired her, but life experience had taught her to be cautious. Every gesture Chris made moved and worried her at the same time. David decided to act discreetly. He called Chris into his office, offering him an unmissable opportunity, which was actually intended to separate him from his daughter. Chris, firmly and humbly, refused, saying he wouldn't let himself be manipulated. David, irritated, realized the young man's character was unshakable, something he hadn't expected. Emily began to notice changes in the family dynamic. Her father became stricter and more controlling, while her heart yearned for freedom and true love. She began to stand up for herself, challenging her father's authority, showing courage she had never shown before. Her love for Chris strengthened her in unexpected ways. Chris, even under pressure, continued to support Emily wholeheartedly. He didn't seek status or recognition, he simply wanted her to see the value of love and kindness. Each encounter was a mutual learning experience, where Emily absorbed courage and humility, while Chris admired the transformation he saw in the young woman. Virginia tried to protect Chris, advising him on the risks of getting involved with Emily. She knew the young woman's arrogance and impulsivity and feared her son would get hurt. Despite her fear, she trusted Chris's integrity and knew he would follow his heart. Each piece of advice was filled with emotion and unspoken concern. Emily began to apologize more openly to Virginia, acknowledging her past behavior. The young woman felt ashamed of her arrogance and treated the cleaning lady with respect, guided by her love for Chris. Virginia, moved, watched these small changes with discreet tears. Emily's transformation became visible and real. David, realizing his daughter was getting closer to someone beyond his control, tried to create subtle obstacles. He used hotel influences to limit meetings, send indirect messages, and even test Chris's patience. His every action was calculated, but it also revealed his fear of losing control over Emily. Emily, determined, didn't let her father's interference shake her feelings. She defended Chris, demonstrating maturity and courage. Each confrontation with David strengthened her, making her more self-assured and determined to follow her heart. The young woman began to free herself from the shackles of family arrogance. Chris and Emily continued to meet discreetly, discovering the small pleasures of simple life together. Walks, evening conversations, and moments of shared silence built intimacy between them. Trust and love grew with each passing day, creating a solid foundation for their relationship. Virginia, watching, felt both pride and fear. She knew Emily still had much to learn, but she saw clear signs of change. Every act of kindness and courage from Chris inspired the billionaire's daughter and comforted her watchful mother. One day, David tried to intervene directly, forbidding Emily from seeing Chris. The young woman, with newfound determination and courage, defied her father, declaring that she would choose her own path. This moment marked a turning point where Emily demonstrated maturity and independence. Chris supported Emily, but kept his distance as a precaution. He knew the challenge with David wouldn't be easy, but he trusted in her strength. Their relationship grew stronger through adversity, proving that true love requires patience and courage. Emily, feeling more confident, began to care less about status and more about character. She valued every gesture Chris made, every sincere word, realizing that wealth doesn't define a person's worth. Her transformation became visible to everyone around her. Virginia remained the voice of reason, reminding Chris to protect himself, but at the same time moved by the blossoming love. She knew that every gesture he and Emily were making was shaping a better future, full of hope and learning. David, realizing his attempts at control were failing, began to reflect on his own behavior. He observed his daughter's courage and Chris's integrity, questioning his own values. The tension between power, wealth, and love began to shift the family dynamic. Emily publicly defended Chris at the hotel, demonstrating her strength and conviction. Her every gesture demonstrated that love and inner transformation were more important than privilege or status. Chris, moved, felt pride and gratitude for the young woman's courage.
The day began overcast, with heavy clouds reflecting the tension in the air. Chris and Emily strolled through the hotel garden, trying to enjoy moments of calm before the inevitable confrontation with David. They both knew their relationship would face resistance, but the love between them gave them courage. Every step seemed charged with meaning. Every look conveyed confidence and determination. Virginia watched from afar, her heart heavy. She knew the moment of confrontation had arrived and feared for her son's emotional safety. Every gesture Chris and Emily made showed unity, but also vulnerability. The cleaning lady felt tears well up, a mixture of pride and fear. She knew something big was about to happen. David, sitting in his office, watched the security cameras. His gaze was cold and calculating as he pondered the best course of action. He couldn't allow his daughter to get involved with someone beyond her control. At the same time, he felt a twinge of curiosity. He wanted to see how far Emily would go to defend her love. Chris received a message from David, summoning him to the office. The billionaire wanted to discuss the relationship, but the message had a threatening tone. Chris took a deep breath, knowing he was facing a powerful man determined to maintain control. He felt no fear, only a firmness in his heart. Emily followed Chris to his office, determined not to stray from him. Each step was a challenge, but she felt courage pulsing within her. The contrast between her father's arrogance and Chris's simplicity made the atmosphere tense. She squeezed Chris's hand discreetly, conveying silent support and mutual strength. David began the confrontation with sharp words, questioning Chris's relationship and integrity. His voice was authoritative, laced with contempt, but also with veiled concern. Emily stood her ground, facing her father with newfound courage. Chris responded calmly, explaining that love and character are worth more than status or wealth. The atmosphere in the office was tense, every word heavy in the air. Virginia, watching from afar, felt her heart sink with each sentence. She knew Chris was being tested, but she trusted in her son's strength and integrity. The tension grew with each passing moment, and the outcome seemed imminent. David tried to manipulate the situation, offering Chris jobs and favors in exchange for keeping Emily away. Chris firmly refused, showing he wouldn't be swayed. Emily, impressed by her beloved's attitude, felt her love grow even deeper. Chris's determination strengthened the bond between them. Emily finally spoke up, confronting her father and publicly defending Chris. Her voice carried firmness and emotion, demonstrating that she would not be manipulated. David was surprised by his daughter's courage, something he hadn't expected. The room seemed to vibrate with the power of love and truth. Virginia, overcome with emotion, felt tears well up again. She knew Emily was truly changing, influenced by Chris's love and courage. Every gesture, every word, confirmed that the young woman's transformation was genuine. Pride and relief mingled in her heart. David, realizing he couldn't control the situation, began to reflect on his own actions. The arrogance and power that had always defined him were powerless against the sincerity of love. He felt a pang of respect for Chris and cautious pride in Emily's courage. Chris took the moment to reaffirm his feelings. He spoke calmly and sincerely, explaining that he was there for love, not self-interest. Emily held his hand, feeling the intense connection between them. Truth and transparency broke down barriers and dissolved silent tensions. The billionaire began to relax slightly, realizing his daughter was emotionally secure. Chris's courage and integrity impressed him. David felt he had lost control, but he gained a new perspective on love, character, and family. Emily, overcome with emotion, discreetly hugged Chris, feeling the battle had been won. Each gesture of affection cemented the strength of their relationship. Virginia, watching from a distance, smiled through tears, seeing her son finally recognized and loved. David, still serious, finally took a step back, accepting that his daughter's decision was final. He realized that absolute control doesn't bring happiness, and that true love requires trust. The billionaire's change was subtle, but significant. Emily stood firm, looking at Chris with tenderness and gratitude. The confrontation had strengthened their relationship, making it resilient against adversity. Each challenge they faced together increased their trust and mutual respect. Virginia approached discreetly, hugging Chris tightly. He felt the warmth of maternal support and the mixed emotions that filled the room. His mother's pride and excitement were evident, further strengthening the family bond. The hotel, once a scene of tension and conflict, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The windows reflected the late afternoon light, illuminating emotional faces and peaceful hearts. Each character began to realize that profound changes were taking place. Chris and Emily walked side by side through the garden, hands intertwined. The morning's tension gave way to hope and serenity. They felt that, despite everything, true love had triumphed over manipulation and pride. The morning sun illuminated the hotel, reflecting off the windows and gardens, creating a sense of peace after turbulent days. Chris and Emily walked side by side,
still feeling the adrenaline of their recent confrontation. The air was fresh and fragrant, mingling with flowers and wet grass. Each step seemed to seal the decision they had both made, together, regardless of their differences. Virginia watched from afar, overcome with emotion. She knew that her son's courage and Emily's change had transformed everyone's destiny. Pride and emotion filled her with silent tears. She felt that emotional justice and true love were finally being rewarded. Emily held Chris's hand tightly, feeling safe and tender. The young woman reflected on all the changes taking place within her. Her former pride and arrogance gave way to empathy and gratitude. She realized that true love transforms not just hearts, but entire lives. David approached discreetly, observing the couple. His expression softened, reflecting acceptance and respect. He felt proud to see his daughter's courage and the young man's integrity. For the first time, he understood that power without love does not create happiness. Virginia finally approached Emily, tears in her eyes. The embrace was silent, filled with forgiveness and recognition. Emily felt the old hostility disappear, replaced by respect and affection. The tension between the two women began to dissipate, creating space for reconciliation. Chris, watching the scene, felt his heart warm. He realized that love had the power to heal old wounds and unite disparate hearts. Every act of courage and kindness had paved the way for this moment. Emily looked at David and spoke sincerely. "Dad, I choose to follow my heart. He showed me what true love is." The firmness in her voice impressed the billionaire, who nodded silently. He knew he could no longer control his daughter's feelings and finally accepted her decision. Virginia smiled, wiping away tears. She knew Chris had found someone who loved him for who he was, not what he possessed. Her son's courage and kindness inspired everyone around him, showing that integrity and true love always prevail. Emily approached Virginia, this time with humility and gratitude. "Thank you for everything. And I'm sorry for what I said before," the young woman said. Virginia felt the genuine forgiveness in Emily's gaze and knew that their relationship could begin again, this time based on respect. David, still watching, realized that Emily's transformation wasn't just superficial. She was truly changed, more empathetic and mature. The billionaire felt silent pride in his daughter's courage and Chris's steadfast character. Chris grabbed Emily by the waist and pulled her close. The warmth of his embrace conveyed security, love, and gratitude. Emily rested her head on his chest, feeling the protection and affection she'd always sought. Their connection was solid, built on courage, honesty, and transformation. Virginia took a deep breath, feeling peace finally settle in. Fear and worry gave way to pride and relief. She knew Chris had made the right choice and that Emily was learning to become a better person. David approached and, with a slight smile, extended his hand to Chris. "You're welcome to our family." The gesture marked the end of the tension, showing that respect and love can overcome any social barrier. Emily smiled at her father, hugging him quickly. The reconciliation was shy, but sincere. She felt that finally all the emotional loose ends were beginning to connect. Forgiveness and acceptance were creating a new family dynamic. Chris, Emily, and Virginia walked together through the garden, feeling the gentle breeze and the sun warm their faces. Each step was a celebration of courage, love, and integrity. They knew that the challenges ahead would be faced together as a united family. David watched from afar, a mixture of emotion and reflection. He realized that absolute control does not bring happiness. Freedom of choice and true love are more powerful than any wealth or status. Emily felt proud of her own growth. Every gesture Chris made helped her become a more empathetic and understanding person. The internal transformation was visible and inspiring, and she knew she would never be the same again. Virginia, overcome with emotion, looked at Chris and Emily, feeling that all the suffering and challenges had been worth it. She knew that love had the power to heal wounds and transform lives. Pride for her son and for the young woman's transformation filled her heart. The group sat in the garden, enjoying the tranquility after the emotional storm. The scent of flowers and the bird song created a scene of hope and renewal. Each breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the strength of the love and courage that had united them. Chris held Emily's hand again, looking deeply into his eyes. "We did it together," he said emotionally. Emily smiled, feeling like she had finally found security and true love. Virginia watched, tears streaming down her face, but this time of pure joy. She knew that her family's story, full of challenges and twists and turns, had reached a point of hope and happiness. David, moved, sat nearby, reflecting on the power of love and integrity. He realized that despite pride and wealth, true happiness depends on genuine connections and the courage to follow one's heart. Emily hugged Chris tenderly, feeling that nothing could shake their bond now. The gratitude and love growing within her transformed every gesture and thought. They were ready to face any challenge together. Virginia approached, holding the couple's hands. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. The family was finally united, healed, and strengthened by their experiences. The sun was setting, painting the sky with golden and pink hues, while the hotel reflected the soft light. Peace finally settled in, and every heart felt the importance of courage, love, and forgiveness. Chris and Emily walked hand in hand to the hotel balcony, gazing out at the illuminated city. They knew challenges lay ahead, but they were confident they would face them together. Virginia smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and happiness. She knew that her son's heroism and Emily's transformation had created a better future for everyone. Love had triumphed. David finally smiled, a rare but sincere gesture. He realized that life isn't just about wealth and power, but about courage, love, and reconciliation. Emily looked at Chris tenderly, tears of joy in her eyes. "Thank you for showing me how to truly love," she said emotionally. Chris squeezed her hand, returning every feeling with tenderness. Virginia hugged her son once more, moved and grateful. Pride and happiness filled her heart, knowing that everything they had endured had brought them to this moment of peace. David watched the family reunited, realizing that the power of love and integrity had overcome barriers and transformed lives. He felt a new hope in his heart. The couple walked through the moonlit garden, hands intertwined and hearts connected. Each step celebrated the victory of love over pride, wealth, and fear. Emily smiled at Virginia and David, feeling gratitude and belonging. Her transformation was complete, and the family bond strengthened. Chris looked at Emily tenderly, feeling that they had finally achieved something real. Their love had become indestructible. And so, the story ends with hearts united, lives transformed, and a family strengthened by love, courage, and forgiveness. If you enjoyed this exciting story full of twists and turns, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and emotional stories.